you talk about all the details. I am the detail guy, but so when you say design restaurants to make money, these are the details that you pay attention to.
Hello, everybody. We're back again. This is Diane Armitage with Bruce Russo, and we are talking restaurant revenue and how to increase that from the very beginning all the way to the end and all the way through the middle. So Bruce Russo is the GOAT when it comes to restaurant design and construction. He's created and constructed nearly 600 restaurants across the United States of America. And I've devoted 30 years to global marketing, particularly for restaurants, to help them with innovative strategies and concepts. And we are here to help you as restaurant operators, as chefs, even patrons who are interested in the operations of restaurants. We are here to help restaurants do what, Bruce?
Make money.
Make money. That's right. And so if you've listened to any of our earlier podcasts, we've talked about how you can enhance your revenue pods. You approach your restaurant with different pods of revenue. And we've talked about a few of these already. But today we're going to talk about a really interesting one, bars. Bars are great. Okay.
Kahuna.
So if you've listened, big kahuna. If you've listened to our previous, we've been talking about having cocktail tables near the host stand, which is not the bar. This is a separate revenue pod. And if you've missed all of that, we'll get you back to that episode. This is actually bringing somebody into your bar and how you create a revenue pod right there and then without escorting them to the tables for dining. They may stay in the bar. They may be eventually escorted to the tables. But here's how we want to talk about how you can create greater revenue there. So first of all, Bruce, I want to talk about how you actually construct a bar to make revenue for clients. Now, let me tell you, I went to a new restaurant last night in Laguna Beach, and I sent you a picture. I don't know if you recognized what I was trying to show you, but the bar and the seats were so close to a row of tables, booths along the edge of the wall, that there was maybe a foot between the bar stool being pushed into the bar and the beginning of the booths. And so when people were trying to get in and out of their seats at the bar, and when they were trying to guide people to the 4 or 5 booths that they had along the wall, it was a disaster. And it was a brand new grand opening of a restaurant.
Well,
you're quiet.
Sounds to me like, well, I mean, it's obvious that somebody didn't pay attention to the clearance with the bar stool away from the bar versus a circulation path for, what do we talk about? The blue shirts are the worker bees that have the blue shirts on. You have to give them a path for them to do their job. Doesn't sound like that happened.
Correct. No, and it was so close. Like I went with you into one of the restaurants you designed in Dallas, and you took me around to like 25 of them, so I can't remember which one was which. But it was an absolutely beautiful restaurant. They were doing brunch, and you had the dining area, and then you had bar tables, and then you had the bar, and you had all this beautiful room between all of it.
Yes.
It was just immaculate. I loved it. So what do you usually plan for when you're designing the bar?
Okay, so the bar is a fairly substantial portion of revenue. So it's a pretty strong pot of revenue. And there's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of things that sell for the restaurant. And here's the key. You have to design the bar to sell by default. Okay, so what does that mean? So what does that mean? Well, I design by default, and I've explained my definition of that. And so sales by default It's where and how you put the liquor on display, how the bartenders interact with the clients that are sitting at the bar, and do they shake the shaker of the drink like they're wrestling a madman, or do they do it in a sexy way to indulge more sales? That's all training.
Well said.
It's all
Yes.
training. So it just kind of starts there. How they pour the liquor and how they, they're on stage. If there's 5
Yes.
bartenders at the bar, they're on stage. And they have to do their Las Vegas show from the time they get there to the time they leave.
Absolutely true. It is absolutely true. And you have to make it as easy as possible for them by designing by default their workstation, so to speak.
Exactly. So everything there again. So we go back to the 4-foot square in the kitchen. The bartender has a 4-foot square also. And he doesn't need to leave that 4-foot square. That's where he does his job. So between that 4-foot square and his reach, he needs accomplice. He needs to do his entire shift in that 4-foot square and accomplish everything that he needs to do for the night. And as you know, the better the bartender, the more friendly the bartender, the bigger the tips. And you get clientele that come and sit at the bar just for that particular bartender.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I was noticing in a restaurant last night that they actually have 2 stations at the bar because it was a U-shaped bar. They have 2 stations for the servers. So one group of servers comes up to this particular station to get their drinks from the bartender, and another group of servers goes to that station to get their drinks from the bartender. And those bartenders never left a 4-foot square.
There you go.
And then they had a bar back who was doing the business in between them. He was setting up the glasses. He was doing all that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, this is a very well-organized bar. When I went to the grand opening the other night, and of course, every grand opening is a little bit, right? But the bartenders were on top of each other, moving around. And they probably had been assigned certain sections of the bar. But in this particular case, the bar only had one service station at the far end. And then it was more of a like a horseshoe shape. And they were kind of all over each other in the bar. And the other thing I noticed was that the shelves were so high that even the tallest guy in there was having difficulty getting to the liquor on the shelves.
Wow. Amazing.
I know.
Yeah, 60 inches is the benchmark off the floor for the back bar.
Okay.
And
that's good to know.
At 60 inches, guess what? When you're sitting in a bar stool, guess where your line of sight is at? 60 inches.
You are so smart. Okay.
It's all relevant. All this comes together and it's all relevant, and how it sells and how it functions, and how the people behind the bar do their job. And I always design with a service bar at one end for their servers to get their cocktails. That bartender serves nobody else but the servers. That's his job.
Right.
Because it's a nonstop function.
Exactly.
If it's a bigger restaurant, I prefer to design a service bar within the back of the house to where it's connected basically with the wait station in the back of the house, and it's near the expo line. So when the servers go to the back of the house and pick up things on the expo line, the POS is there, the service bar is there, the water's there, the cappuccino, the coffee, everything is right there, and they make their pass in their alleyway. And at the end of that is where I typically put the service bar.
Yeah, it makes sense. When I was at this grand opening the other night, they had actually built a service bar. They have a large restaurant, so they'd actually built a service bar in sort of like the second half toward the back, which still had many tables and all of that kind of thing. But he had been set up to serve that 1/3 side of the restaurant. So I thought that that was an interesting, nice save because the front bar was absolutely overrun. It
And
was
was
way
that
busy.
service bar viewable from the dining room?
Yes. Yeah. So they had it actually set up with a back bar with all of the liquor. And it was a pretty nice bar, but nothing that you could sit at, no chairs or anything, you know.
No,
So
I
he
get
was
it.
just
I get
strictly a
it.
service bar. And I'm sure that he probably had to explain to 92 people that you can't sit here
You can't sit
and
here.
I'm
You
not going
got
to take
yeah.
your order.
No, and that's why I put it in the back of the house. But I like the back of the house service bar for all your chilled bottled goods like champagne or white wine or Cabernet or whatever that needs to be chilled. I like to take that function away from the bartender because there's other things. I view the bartenders as the brain surgeons. And there's no sense in having brain surgeons pulling ingrown fingernails.
Right, exactly.
You see what I'm
You
saying?
want them
So
really being mixologists. You want them to be the
exactly,
craft guys who are pulling in all the audience and the
correct.
engagement. They're not
Bottle
pouring a glass of
service
wine.
is, to me, bottle service to an upscale bartender, mixologist, it's a little disrespectful.
Oh, it's well put. Another thing that I've noticed in several bars lately is the wine on tap, basically,
Yes. Big thing.
where they'll either have the wine on an actual tap, or they'll
Yes.
have one of those, where they put the wine bottles and they keep the
And
vacuum in.
it's got nitrogen in it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. What do you think of those?
I think they're functional. I've even seen them to where kind of a self-serve kind of thing where you swipe your credit card and then you select
We
your
have one of
one
those
and
in Laguna.
and put your glass under it. And I mean, it's functional for whatever needs, but there's nothing like the human pour.
Yes, this is true. This is true. Okay, so when you are designing a bar, like for instance, the bar that we visited in the restaurant that we're thinking of helping, that bar had been set up in the 70s, early 80s. It had been designed by an architect who wasn't familiar with restaurant work. And
Correct.
the glass, all of the glasses and things like that were actually off to the side in sort of like a cupboard, like an open pantry, so to speak. So how do you design the glassware so that it's easily accessible? Where do you prefer to have that?
I prefer to give the liquor its center stage and glasses right to left. And stemware on one side and regular cocktail glasses on the other. So
and do you
it all
typically
functions
hang
with the
them?
bartender. I'm
Do you
not a
typically
big
hang
fan
them
of
in the
hanging
garage?
them. No, I'm not a big fan of that. But there are certain ways. There's a couple different ways I do it. I like to put a shelf at 12 inches off the bar top. And that gives you plenty of room for your glassware. And then the liquor bottles start there. So you got 12 and then 3 and 3 and 3 shelves for the stair step for the liquor. And you're still at roughly about 65 inches. You're still in the line of sight of the clientele.
Okay. That makes sense. And what else do you design in the wells of the bar, or how do you do that where you're really thinking about the efficiency and the 4x4 square?
Well, again, ticket average plays a big part of the bar design. Do you put one rack for liquor bottles for your house liquors, or do you put two? It depends on the ticket average of the restaurant.
Mhm.
And all
And how deep you go in bourbons,
correct,
how deep you go
correct,
in vodkas,
and how
that kind of
wide.
thing.
I like to have the jockey box set up at 6 foot wide to give the bartender as much flexibility to do his job as possible.
Okay, define jockey box for people out there who don't know what you're
Okay,
saying.
so the jockey box is everything. It contains everything that the bartender typically uses for every drink. Okay, there's an ice bin, there's a hand sink, there's a dump sink, and then I've been using glass washers that you put the glass and when you push on it, it sprays and cleans the glass.
Those are great.
And then a small cutting board, and then the glassware starts. So, that's like a 6 foot station typically.
Okay, that makes sense.
And
I like
that everything, all the tools of the bartender are there, and everything they needs to function is there.
And then another thing that we noticed at this restaurant that we were both at, that we're looking at, was the narrow space for the blue shirts in
Yes.
that space. So how much space do you typically give inside a bar? Like, what's the minimal amount of space that you give?
I give 39 inches.
39 inches.
Okay. 39 inches. And there's a reason for that, because when whoever the bartender is, and this is the same thing on the cook line, I do 39. 36 is a little cramped for me. I like to do 39. The extra 3 inches makes a world of difference, but
Interesting.
it doesn't add the extra step when they turn. See, when you go to 42, now you put an extra step and when they turn. So if they're getting liquor from the back shelf and they turn at 42 inches, they have to take another step to get to the jockey box.
Okay.
At 39
How did you
inches,
figure this whole thing out? How did you figure out 39 versus 42 inches? I don't even get it.
It's 600 restaurants, girl.
But
this is the kind of thing.
Watch these bartenders, and you just go everywhere and just watch the bartenders.
You and I talk about this every day, and everybody thinks restaurants are so easy to design. Okay, you're listening to a guy that's done it over 550 times. So these are the things when you hire a guy like me.
That's true.
It's the knowledge to know.
It's so meticulous.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the meticulousness of it is so important because it makes revenue happen, and it's less wear and tear on your employees.
It's flawless revenue. It's trouble-free revenue. Yeah. Big difference.
Default revenue.
And then your back bar guys, they know exactly what they need to load. They got glass carts. They bring the glasses. It takes them 30 seconds to bring the glasses. So in a typical bar setup for the bartender, you're going to have the jockey box with the hand sink and the dump sink, the ice bin, hit a little countertop for him to cut fruits. And then next to that, I'd like to do like a 30-inch freezer to chill the glasses. So everything is right there. His martini glasses are chilled. I don't put martini glasses on the back bar. They need to be chilled.
Agreed. I even actually like a cold, white wine glass. It's lovely to have a chilled white wine glass.
Exactly.
So, okay. So now let me ask you about the bar tops, because I've seen some beautiful bar tops that you've put into restaurants. And so what do you typically go with as far as material? And then we'll talk about lighting your bar.
I like stone, any kind of stone. I prefer lighter color stone than dark color stone. I think dark color stone sends kind of an angry signal. It just kind of sends an angry signal of what the bar is. Lighter colors seem to be a happier, more female gender.
Well, I think it's elegant.
It is.
I like it.
It's more inviting.
It's elegant. Mhm.
Yes.
And so I have seen you actually light a bar from the bottom up. And,
Yes.
you know, I've seen it happen more often now, but it's not necessarily a trend because it's a lot of work involved in order to make that happen correctly. And we were talking
Well,
about the one that you had in Florida that, you know, you
yes.
were working with electricians and, you know,
Yeah.
so how do you actually light a bar from below?
Well, it's a kind of a technique that I developed myself, and that I've done it for one particular concept, so we won't. I don't think I'll do it
Share
again
that.
because they're you know they're they're the ones that got it, so they're the only ones that are going to get it. But
Well,
it
wow.
there's a whole lot that goes into it because first of all, the stone has to be transparent of light.
Hmm.
And that when you go looking for that, there's only 3 or 4 different stones that'll do that.
Hmm. Hmm.
It was a big thing years ago with onyx. So wow, you can light onyx, but it's very 1980s. The look with onyx
Interesting.
because
Uh-huh.
it's very golden and it looks like an old color TV. You remember the console colored TVs that we used to have growing up?
Yeah. Hmm.
When I see an onyx bar, that's the first thing I think of. So there's a couple stones out there that they're precious stones and very expensive, but as you've seen the end result. And it's
Oh,
very meticulous.
it's
It's very
stunning. And
meticulous
I
to,
love the
yes,
fact that you've created it as a brand look for that particular concept. I think that that's really neat. That's awesome.
yes,
Okay, so let's
yes,
talk about bar stools because I have some, things to say about bar stools. Oof. And I also have things to say about like whether you have a step up where you can rest your feet or whether you're supposed to put your feet on the bar stool. But the thing I hate
yeah,
the most is a bar stool that doesn't even have foot things. And so your feet just dangle.
yeah, not good.
Yeah. Okay. Not good. Okay. So bar stools, good, bad, indifferent.
There are good bar stools and there's bad bar stools.
Mhm.
It's my preference to always do a bar stool with a back.
Yes.
There's a lot of
Well,
bar
I
stool
mean, and for liability
designs.
reasons.
Well, and there's a lot of bar stools that don't have a back. So
Hmm.
with the back is much better. And here's something that's really important when you design a bar. The bar stools are at a certain height. To put dining tables directly up behind them and that client sitting in a chair, what do you think they're looking at?
Hmm. Which is exactly what was happening the other night.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so the running joke about the plumbers, right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So if you have a bar stool without a back,
You take that risk.
you take that risk of
Hmm.
seeing whatever the crack is in in the chair, in the bar stool. So
Bar stool.
you will never, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you'll never see a design that I've done to where there's dining tables directly behind the bar stools. I don't do it
Right. Exactly.
because you have to phase
Well,
down.
and I've talked with restaurant owners before who purposely put in bar stools without backs because they say that it is less comfortable. And so their patrons will leave more quickly. They'll be able to turn the stool. And for me, I think that there's a lot more ways that you can make revenue happen in a bar rather than making your patrons uncomfortable sitting on a bar stool without a back.
There are.
Yeah. So, and the other night when I was in this, I hate to pick on this restaurant, but the other night when I was in this restaurant, they did have like a built up stool, like step against the bar, against the bottom of the bar, so that you could put your foot on it. Yeah. It was actually a concrete, you know,
Step up,
kind of just a block.
curb,
Yeah.
just a curb.
it was so slick, my feet kept sliding off of it. So do you prefer to do bar stool rungs, or do you prefer to have some kind of a step there against the bar?
Well, again, ticket average plays on the design. Okay. So I prefer
Well, how does
bar
it play in the
stools.
design?
I prefer bar stools with the rung for your feet because not everybody, some people like to put their leg to the left of the stool or the right, and they have the four sides to put, the foot rail on. If you do a brass foot rail, which I've done many times, then the bar stool can be anything because you have the brass foot rail. The concrete step up or millwork step up or marble step up or whatever, I just don't do it a lot because, you get in the $100 check average. It's not the look. It doesn't give you the elegance or the panache of the you know what I'm saying? That's more of a bar. Like if you were driving, let's say you're driving up the freeway and there's a neon sign that says bar, kind of blinking, open sign in the window. That's what you would see there. I mean, that's what I envision. That's why I don't do it a lot.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So I also want to ask you about the special things that you put under the bar, which is so vital to me, so vital to women as well. But you do several things. So give us an idea of what you do to make the patron stay more enjoyable.
Number one, purse hooks. Purse hooks are every 2 foot on any bar that I built, 2 foot on center. Then I add the plug strip.
And I love you for it. And
the plug strip that I use, it's a 110 volt plug, and then the next one is a USB port. So every other one is a plug USB port, and those are typically 5 foot long. And we, depends on the side of the bars, based on how many we do, how many we put under there. And then the bottom of the bar, and health inspectors love this. Before we put the sub deck on for the plywood, we cover the bottom of that piece of plywood with FRP, which is a plastic reinforced material that, guess what, bubble gum doesn't stick to, nothing sticks to it. So by default, that kind of stays clean.
Got you. Didn't you say that you had a health inspector actually look at it once and he was just like, oh my goodness.
Yes. Never seen it before.
Never seen it before.
Because we cover the whole sheet before we do the sub deck. So before we set that sub deck on, we cover the whole bottom. So not only is it on the client side, it's on the bartender side too.
Got it. Okay.
So what happens is the wall of the bar, and then you got FRP. Now you got FRP to FRP, totally washable, scrubbable surface by default.
By default. Beautiful. Okay. So you do purse hooks, you do plugs, you have USB plugs, and you have a no stick gum thing.
Correct. And then
the FRP is the no stick gum thing.
Correct. And then typically we put LED strip lighting. Okay. Both on the bartender side. It just adds a nice, sexy look to, it kind of highlights the finishes of the dye wall, whether it be tile or marble or millwork. It's, it's very comforting and very approachable to see that light.
I like it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about setting up the bar besides the bar itself, like the bar room, the bar tables. Okay. How do you typically, if you have your wish on how you typically like to do this, how do you put this in place?
I really like the U-shaped bar with the island in the middle, but you have to be careful on how tall that island gets, because the key to a U-shaped bar is this client being able to see this client, and that contact by eye contact, whether it's a conversation. So I very rarely make a straight bar, if I can't do a U-shaped bar, then I do a radius bar. And the reason why I radius the bar is because the person at each end can see everybody on the radius. If it's straight, the person on the ends they have to lean over the bar to look down the bar to see faces.
Right.
So if I bring that radius up, depending on how long it is from left to right, I may add a 12-inch radius, to where it comes out in lieu of being a straight bar. That lets everybody see everybody's face at the bar.
Yeah.
Now it creates a bar community by default.
Right. Correct. I love that. And then outside of the actual bar, whether you create radius or U-shape, then how do you set up the rest of the room for the bar?
Okay, it depends how much room I have. Typically, the perfect bar, I like to have the bar, U-shaped bar, and then I like to have a standing drink rail somewhere because people like to stand and have their drink.
Point. Yeah.
People like to stand and talk. Conversation seems to flow a lot easier with some people when they're standing more so than sitting. Kind of like me, a lot of people talk with their hands. So if they're standing, they have more freedom. And then the big note to that, yes, the big note to that is you can get more people at a countertop standing than you can sitting.
So how do you incorporate that? How far away is it from?
I typically allow, so when I do the drawing, I park on the drawing, I'll park the bar stool half in and half out at the seating side of the bar. Then I allow 4 feet clear path.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put whether it's a line of high top tables, or is it a banquette? It depends on the design that I'm working on, but there's a lot of things, and it could be just a dividing wall with the bar rail, stand-up bar rail, 12-inch bar rail, where people stand. But you can also put high top chairs there too. And if it's like a steakhouse, then I'll make that drink rail 18 inches instead of 12 because somebody can eat there. 12 inches, you're not going to eat a steak at the plates in a steakhouse are typically 10.5 to 11 inches. So it doesn't work on a 12-inch countertop.
You know the size of a steak plate.
Yes.
Yes. This is the differentiator, people. This is the differentiator. So another thing that you had mentioned, this just reminded me, the ADA seating at a bar, which is a requirement in all updated bars, it's a requirement. So you've got the lower seating and the lower counter to allow for, wheelchair access or whatever. And I like what you do. You have kind of a different take on it. So are you willing to share that secret?
Yeah. So, Texas is probably one of the toughest. I think they are the toughest ADA handicap compliant states in all 50 states. And so, it doesn't matter what state we're in. If I design to the Texas code, it's probably more than over the top than any other place where we go. So at the bar,
and you know that every state is going to catch up. Every state is going to catch up to that sooner
than later.
Yeah.
But at the bar, I like to allow an 18-inch by 48-inch countertop just for ADA. And it depends how big the bar is. The design factor says 5% of the seating has to be ADA compliant. So if you got 20 bar stools around, you do 5%, and whatever, how many bar stools you have, you do 5%. So a lot of them are 2 or 3 is probably plenty. And that handicap countertop can be anywhere from 3 foot to 6 foot, 7 foot. But the ideal plan is I typically put a server well there, because when it's not being accessed by ADA, it can act as a service bar, and the step down counter works very well with the serving staff.
Oh, very nice. That's a great plan. I also
There's a
like the
difference
idea
between.
of you.
Go ahead. Well,
I
the
like
bar
the
top,
idea.
the bar top height is 42. The ADA height is 34 inches off the floor maximum. So that
Okay.
step down in countertops, it pretty much aligns with the equipment on the back bar. So it, it's there's no, it's just a ease of function.
Right, exactly. But I like how you said that sometimes you'll actually add in more seats than required because,
Now,
especially
yes,
women
yes,
who want to cross their legs sitting at a
correct,
bar or a table.
correct.
They have
And
this
I've done many bars that way.
beautiful,
Yes.
yeah.
At a
And so
34
you've
inch
actually,
countertop, women love to sit at that lower countertop because they're not climbing on a bar stool with a skirt on or a dress or whatever. And it's just it's a regular chair height.
right, that's
And
beautiful.
they can cross their legs. It's a very comfortable, seating arrangement for women.
Wow, I like it. I thought it was very creative of you to come up with that because most people, do the very minimal that they have to do. And you said, well, actually, when we're thinking about females in a bar, this actually works very well for them. And if it's not being used entirely for ADA, they have more seating here that's available to them. So that's awesome. All right. Well, I just wanted to ask another quick question on bar menus. Now, this is something more front of house operations going, but in my opinion, having a bar menu that is different than what you're offering in the dining room is a plus because it gives it that kind of community feel where you know that you're going to get this at the bar and it's a different menu. Now you may have some of those items featured in your regular menu, but I like the fact that people will come up with a bar menu versus handing you the entire restaurant menu at the bar. But what is your opinion on that?
I'm a big fan of the bar menu because the bar menu should typically be a sharing menu
Correct.
to where there's items
And
that
it's
you
your
share.
highest dollar.
Right,
And
most
it is your
profitable
highest
items
dollar
on the
revenue.
menu. Yes, absolutely. Plus,
Yeah.
if there's 3 people that are going to share, they typically buy 4 items.
They do?
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay. But it makes
There's
sense.
there's always an oddball. It's like, hey, I'm going to have the onion rings. I'm going to have the fries. I'm going to have the falafel. But let's go ahead and get,
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
Well, it's interesting
Let's get
too
some shrimp too.
typically when I join one friend at a bar, we'll order 3 items.
There you go.
So, gee.
It's, and but see, and you talk about all the details. I am the detail guy, but when you when you say design restaurants to make money, these are the details that you pay attention to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like we've talked about before, this is the easiest food with the highest profit margin.
Yes.
And so it's very awesome to put these together. And I love the idea of doing more shared items on the bar menu than just, single items so that you are doing exactly what you're saying. And you're anticipating 1.5 to 2 drinks per person in most cases when they're at the bar.
Correct.
Now, when they're waiting for a table to go into the restaurant and they've come into the bar, rather because maybe our restaurant owner doesn't know about the cocktail tables at the front, they've come into the bar, they still are going to have at least one cocktail and at least one appetizer or shared appetizer between them.
Yes.
Before they before they head to the table.
That's the
Now,
golden rule.
you and I both, that is the golden rule. And you and I both agree on this. I'm going to let you say this, but the most important thing to do in the bar when they are called to their table is to do what with this?
You want to check
room?
out whatever they bought at the bar, apps, drinks. You want to cash them out at the bar and then seat them for dinner. Don't let the apps and the bar tab get added to the dinner bill, because when the dinner bill comes and they're both added, typically their hair stands on end.
Right.
I'm not
And they
saying that
spend the
all the
same amount
time,
of
but
money.
correct.
Yeah. They'll spend the same amount of money at the bar, one pod,
Correct.
at the dinner,
Correct.
and
Correct.
they don't think about it as being this hair standing on end experience.
Correct. Correct.
Very good.
They don't go home and add the checks together.
Right.
Typically.
Right.
Typically.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it for bars. Can you think of anything else? I mean, I know you can think of all kinds of other things. We can do a whole another 2, 3, 4 topics on bars. But for this introductory information, what do you think? Want to add anything else that's of paramount?
Well, you know, it operates totally different than the restaurant. It operates totally different than the dining room. And so from an operational side, it has to be set up as its own machine, its own revenue pod. It's managed totally different than the dining room. And that's the number one key. So it has to be built differently than the dining room.
Absolutely. And another thing that you and I both agree on this as well. You do not put servers who are taking care of diners in the dining room and give them tables in the bar as well. It's just, no. You have your servers in the bar. You have your servers in the dining room. Correct. And there is a purpose and a plan for that. None of this back and forth.
No.
Agreed.
No, because the servers in the dining room, they're working on a 60 to 80 to 90 minute experience.
Exactly.
Okay. The servers in the bar, typically it's a 20 to 40 minute experience. I mean, if the restaurant is managed properly, it would be a 20 to 40 minute experience, because you want them, you're done with your cocktails, you're done with your apps. Now let's go sit you for dinner, and now we're going to sell you a bottle of wine.
Correct.
That's to go with your dinner. Okay, so you don't want, I mean, you can sell wine in the bar, and a lot of people drink a glass of wine in the bar, but the main goal for wine inventory is to sell it at the dinner table.
Correct.
But because you're not, we know that the revenue on wine is, we love the profit margin on the wine. Mm-hmm. But instead of doing it 4 at a time at the bar, you do it one time at the dining room table. Agreed. It's a different sale.
It is a different sale. It's a different experience. It's a different community. Correct. Okay. Well, folks, I hope you learned something about setting up, building out a bar, and some of the operations involved in a bar. And of course, we'll be coming back and talking more about details on this. But the next podcast we're going to be talking about has to do with what Bruce considers the most important room in the house. What would that room be?
Restrooms.
And I know you've been to many restrooms, and they do not look like the most important room in the house. So on our next episode, we're going to be talking about why this is so important. It's not necessarily a revenue pod by any stretch, but why it is so important to your front of house. All right. So please like us, subscribe, come back for more later, and we will see you back at Restaurant Revenue, and we'll be talking more about it as we move forward. Thank you so much, folks. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining Bruce and Diane on this journey of mastering restaurant revenue. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your feedback helps them deliver even more of what you want to hear. Until next time, keep refining your approach, stay passionate about your craft, and here's to your restaurant's continued success.